Hello everyone, and welcome to the 2022 National Girls and Women in Sports Day virtual program and celebration. My name is Dakotah Poitra. I am the Athletics Administration Graduate Assistant at North Central College, and I will be your host for today's program. This year is the 36th celebration of National Girls and Women in Sports Day. This day recognizes student athletes, champion athletes, coaches, administrators, and lawmakers committed to providing equitable access to sports for all girls and women. In conjunction with the Women in Sports Foundation, we are excited to host this year's event as it falls on the 100th year celebration of women's athletics at North Central College. In 1921, North Central's women's tennis team became the first women's varsity sport at North Central College. For our program today, we have invited a panel of North Central women leaders who are fierce advocates for student athlete development and belonging. Jessica Brown has served as North Central College's Vice President of Student Affairs and Athletics since fall of 2021. She joins NCC after serving most recently as a Dean of Student Services, Engagement, and Leadership at Eureka College. Brown's prior experiences include serving as Eureka's Title IX Coordinator, Head Women's Volleyball Coach, and Senior Women Administrator. Rebecca Gordon has served as Assistant Vice President for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion since fall of 2019. Gordon is the college's first ever Chief Diversity Officer and has joined the President's Cabinet. Dr. Gordon is a member of the Latina and LGBTQIA+ communities and brings to this role lived experience along with a career dedicated to DEI and Title IX work. Sue Kane is the Associate Athletic Director and Senior Women Administrator for North Central College. During her 8 years on the administrative staff, Kane has had a tremendous impact on the success and growth of the athletics department. Kane's work undoubtedly shows her commitment to creating an equitable and inclusive experience for all student athletes. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to start off by asking each of you, what drives you to be relentless advocates for student athlete belonging, but women athletes specifically?
I'd be happy to jump in and tackle that one. For me, it's both professional and personal, right? And I'll start on the professional side of the house. Working in women's athletics and athletics in general, we have seen an incredible shift over the last 50 years or so in participation, right, of and access to sports for women athletes. But what drives me specifically on the professional front has everything to do with my colleagues and who I'm surrounded by, right? When I take a look around, I'm primarily surrounded by my male counterparts. I represent specifically only 3% within NCAA Division III of women and women of color athletic administrators. So for me, professionally, it's my drive really comes from being able to provide a space and provide access and equity for my women colleagues across there. Personally, it has a lot to do with 2 little girls that I have at home, right? It's always going to come down to that for me. I want their experience, and they're 2 athletes, and they're awesome. These 2 girls are amazing, incredible, fierce athletes, and I want their experience to be 100 times better than my experience, and I want them to be able to pay it forward to the next generation of girl and women athletes. So for me, it's both professional and personal.
I think it's really incredible that we can bring 3 powerful women leaders from North Central, the community itself, in a space. Obviously, I know it's virtual, but I think it's really meaningful that we can have the space to do that. As this year is the 100th celebration of women's athletics at North Central College, how can we continue to celebrate women's athletics individually as an athletic department beyond the wins?
First and foremost, we have to provide a platform. I think it's really important for women athletes to be able to say, what are your experiences? Not feel guilty about those experiences because they are significantly different than men, but provide them the platform to speak out about what their experiences are, and then partnership. I believe that sometimes the equity or the inequities are not really, how do I say this, packaged in a way that everyone can understand. If we could have a better understanding of what is the woman athlete experience for those who are so out of touch with what's fair, we can slowly start chipping away. I mean, stories breaks barriers for individuals, and we really need to chip away at that, not just at North Central, but as sport as a whole. And so I think providing the right platform, supporting those women when they step up and they start speaking, and then just being mindful of what that impact is for them, because for some of us, we've been chipping away at this for a very long time. And so how do we refill those individuals who have been advocating, for years when it comes to supporting our women athletes?
I wanted to hop on that. Like, in addition, I really think it's important to also highlight the new sports that we have for women. I often highlight women's wrestling because I remember when it first started and there were a handful of women, and being able to talk proudly about women in that sport because it was non-traditional, and the bravery they had to enter into that space. And so I think it's also just highlighting the additional sports that women are occupying where they didn't occupy them before.
Absolutely. I think it's, like you had mentioned, a lot of years in the making. And I think when reflecting on North Central, specifically being that 100 years ago in 1921 was when the first women's varsity sport, women's tennis, became officially recognized. That's not that long ago. And I think it's really, it's a big number, but time moves fast. So it really, wasn't that long ago. And I think it's important that we come together, more often than once a year, maybe, and recognize and reflect on the things that we've overcome and the milestones that women athletes have achieved, because they've put all the hard work in to achieve those milestones. Throughout your time and from your perspective, in your time in athletics and working closely with athletics, what are some of the obstacles that you've seen women athletics overcome?
It's the complexity of a woman's athlete's life. It's not just based on gender, but just in terms of my position, there are athletes who struggle with, domestic violence or assault experiences, sexual assault or physical assault in relationships, or stalking that can occur on campus. And so I think it's juggling those experiences with the high demand of a sport in addition to academics. So, there's a complexity of women athletes' lives. Even if there aren't those other things in their lives, it's just trying to have those leadership opportunities, volunteering, and the other kinds of things that they do. I was just so impressed with the activism that our female athletes engaged in 2 summers ago with protests around George Floyd's murder. They're doing a lot. They're committed and passionate. And so I think it is, just a complex picture that they bring to being a woman athlete.
Overcome, there are some things. I think a coach, I appreciate having a woman coach. Mm-hmm. There are still a lot of sports that don't have women coaching women's sports, but there has been a shift in that era. And so I really appreciated being able to go talk to my coach about, hey, this personal thing is going on with my body, and it's one of those days, and be able to candidly speak about that and not feel guilty. I appreciated her restocking personal items in the locker room and thinking consciously of that. And so there have been some headways, but I still think we have a long way to go.
And that's where I think that my passion really lies. And when you take a look at the numbers and the data that is out there, there are amazing institutions. The Tucker Center for Research in Girls and Women's in Sports, that's out of the University of Minnesota. And We Coach, which is a national nonprofit organization that what they're really trying to do is build that pipeline, right? And the Tucker Center specifically focuses on the research part to be able to give those to those key stakeholders who are making the decisions to be able to change that experience, right? So that there are more women at the table that are able to, A, be involved in those key coaching decision-making processes, right? And B, have an amazing influence to be able to mentor and coach that next generation.
Yeah, be a role model.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Because Title IX has not necessarily been kind for the representation of women in coaching positions
It has not.
for women's teams.
The
No.
NCAA did an incredible study, examining the 40-year mark. The 50-year mark is coming up, but they did an incredible study examining 3 different prongs, right? The first prong had everything to do with access, right, and participation rights. Second, prong had everything to do with how sports were funded, just at a base level. And the third was the essentially career field for women coaches administration, where you saw absolutely zero movement in that. I hope 10 years later, and we'll find out because they're going to be redoing the study, I hope that 10 years later we've made some progress, but that for me continues to be the biggest area where I think that there continues to be challenges and obstacles in the way for making true progress in that area.
Absolutely. I also think, Rebecca, to your point, that women athletes' lives are so complex, where they are juggling school, maybe a side job, practice, and then they have to, worry about consciously advocating for themselves. What are some maybe small ways that they can keep pushing and advocating for themselves that's not necessarily overwhelming?
I'm going to say self-care. I can recall my playing days where, you're just going and going and going, and you can lose those small things that allow you to feel like a woman, allow you to feel confident about yourself. Being a woman athlete, your body changes a lot. I mean, I remember coming in at 125 and coach telling me that I had to put all this weight on, and I had never seen that much weight in my life. And now what does that mean? And trying to buy into the system that it'll make me better and what have you. And so I think self-care and truly understanding who you are as a woman, and that takes a lot of work, a lot of what I call soul work. But in order to do that, then you know how to show up in the spaces that may become a little bit more difficult, because you know how to recover from those tough days. You'll understand when someone is trying to push you out of your box, and when people aren't being kind to you. And but I would say self-care, really understand how to take care of yourself so that you can show up or advocate for yourself.
I think that women athletes have an advantage. I think there was an old study I remember from years ago where they have a better sense of what their boundaries are and what those red flags are, because they're having to listen to their body all the time. Because if you push yourself too much, you injure yourself, then you're out for, a period of time or maybe the season. So I think it is really that self-care and listening to yourself, being so grounded in yourself, and then needing to identify those people that you can use as sounding boards. Like, I'm having this thing I'm wrestling with, and this is what I'm thinking, but what do you think? And this is what, I'm getting pushed to do. Please, I need a sounding board for that. But I think just being grounded in yourself, I think is so important. And I think that is established for women athletes, just being an athlete in a sport.
I think the only thing that I would add to it, and I think that, Rebecca, you touched on it just a little bit, is your community and who you surround yourself with, right? That for me is you need to surround yourself with people who are going to lift you up at the end of the day, and making sure that you do that. You're grounded within yourself, and you work with that community. And I use my own community to be able to do that. again, we've talked about this, being one of the few women within an athletic department and surrounding yourself with women who at the end of the day understand, right, what you're going through. You can talk through and use as an amazing sounding board of, hey, this is happening, or I noticed this, or I experienced this, right? So use your community. At the end of the day, they're one of your best assets, and be very mindful about who that community is and make sure that they're lifting you up.
Yes.
Absolutely. I think it's incredibly important, whether it's an individual sport or a team sport, to really utilize the connections that you have. Your teammates are your strongest, I would say, family. And I think it's incredibly important to, be honest with yourself in what you need to show up the best to your sport and for your people. Along the lines of taking care of, your mental health, I also think physical health, your body, is equally as important. And in asking our athletes, what are some of the topics you wanted us to talk about today, body image was actually one of the main topics that came up. It's sad, because I'm not surprised, because what media portrays that a woman body should look like is incredibly unrealistic and very detrimental to, our development, mentally and physically. What, sort of advice do you have to offer women athletes in terms of, how to build a healthy relationship with their body?
This is a powerful one, because I just seeing my children who are young adults grapple with print media and the impact. And within a 10-year period, there are all sorts of social media platforms that folks can tap into that edit. I mean, there's enough editing that happens within magazines, right? But just with, TikTok and all of that stuff, they're editing these photos. And so I think that that's one thing that's difficult, because you don't ever see what's real, and so that's one thing. And then I think the other thing is women often have to navigate that tension between being a strong, powerful athlete and the muscles you need for that, and what society is telling them they need to look like or be like in terms of being a woman or being feminine, and in terms of the sort of the stereotypes that put them in a box that they are not, right? And so I think that is just a sort of a difficult thing to navigate. And it goes back to the self-care, but also just catching yourself, loving your body as it is with its flaws, accepting where you are, not looking at weight or your body as the thing, but as strength and performance and improvement, perhaps, instead of those other more physical demarcations.
Yeah, absolutely. I would just add, look at your body. Don't look at other people's bodies, specifically other women. The social media platform has allowed for us to constantly see all these bodies, right? In all these different outfits. Look at your body. Spend more time looking at your body, right? And then asking yourself, when you're questioning or critiquing another woman's body, why are you doing that? Do you like it when someone does that to you?
Yeah.
Right? But being mindful of how you treat your body, I think, can go a long way. But we spend way too much time critiquing other women's bodies, right? What would you do if you just spent 10 minutes a day just looking at your body in the mirror? It's an exercise I do myself. I'll stand in the mirror at the end of the night, and I just say kind things to my body. You have to be kind to your body. Words matter, and if you're thinking it and you're saying it out loud, that's how you're going to walk around. That's my advice to women athletes.
Yeah. I had a very similar experience entering college. So when I entered college and when I left college, my body looked very different. And probably the most beautiful way, I probably weighed 10, 15 pounds more, but I was this incredibly strong, efficient athlete who put an incredible amount of muscle mass on, and performances changed dramatically from that first year when I walked in to my senior year or so. It's really trusting, right? Trusting your athletic trainer, your strength and conditioning coaches around you, and having that healthy relationship with the weight room and functional movement and food. And food is fuel, right? At the end of the day. So one of the biggest pieces and advice that I like to be able to give to athletes is actually dig into nutrition in a way to figure out how to feed your body in the most amazing way. Stop looking at calorie counts, right? And at the end of the day, just really dig into the nutrition side and figure out how much food is fuel. I eat so much more, right, as a senior in college than I did as a freshman, because I was fueling my body with the right healthy things to be able to have those different performances at the end of the day. So for me, it really hones in on the weight room and the strength and conditioning areas are your friends at the end of the day, and nutrition is one of those pieces where I cannot talk enough about how important actually learning about nutrition is to being a successful athlete and learning to love your body, what you put into it. Exactly what you're talking about of spending time learning about that and being a student of that. You will be able to develop that relationship.
Absolutely. I will shamelessly say that when I was a student athlete and we went in the weight room and you feel like you're lifting weights, crazy heavy weights, you get a PR, and then you end up weighing yourself and you're like, oh my God, I just put on 5 pounds. Maybe the weight room's gonna make me bulky. And I don't wanna be bulky, even though that might actually help my performance, which is truly what I want. But I'm nervous that people are gonna think I'm, too strong. You know what I mean? And I would say that I think the biggest thing that I did to help me alleviate that unnecessary stress was getting rid of a scale.
Yeah.
I don't have a scale in my house. I will never look at one ever again. Huge game changer. But yeah, no, I really appreciate you guys, sharing your experiences, because it is very hard. That is something that is so hard, and is something that, women, regardless of athletics, we're always compared on what we look like.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you sharing that. At this time, we'd like to take a quick look back at athletics at North Central College and hear from a few of our current athletes.
Celebrating women in sports is so important because it allows the hard work and determination of so many female athletes to be shown off, rather than go unnoticed or underappreciated. It is the perfect time for female athletes to reflect on how far we've come, both as individuals and as parts of our team. By giving recognition to the female athletes who have put countless hours and effort into their sport, we are promoting an equal and competitive field of athletics that rivals our past triumphs and accomplishments.
Celebrating women in sports is so important because of the way it brings out equality. Every time that a woman steps out onto a field or court to compete, we're defying gender stereotypes and social norms. We're reminding the world that anyone is capable of anything.
It is so important to celebrate women in sports because it continues to defy gender stereotypes and social norms by fighting for gender equality. Also, it is important to celebrate the women that paved the way for me and so many girls to play sports and to inspire future women.
It is an honor to do what I love at a school that proudly recognizes the female athletes that go through tons of well-earned victories, whether that just be a practice or a national championship. 100 years of giving that recognition to some of the hardest workers ever is no small feat, and there is no place a woman or a female athlete would be prouder to be than here in North Central College.
Female athletes have an inner drive and power in them that allows them to find success in work, relationships, and finding ways to change the world. I'm so proud to be on a team with other women who push me to be a better person and athlete every single day. We learn lessons of resilience, teamwork, trust, and love through a game and the passion that we share for it. Sports has changed my life, and I will forever be grateful for my experience as a student female athlete.
Welcome back, everyone. I want to spend this next half of our discussion talking about career and life after sport, and wanted to start off by asking you all, what sort of challenges may you have faced in what others may perceive as a male-dominated workplace?
So, as a woman in a male-dominant area, period, regardless of what the industry is, I often face where men like to speak over me, or I'll say a recommendation and then nobody hears it. 5 minutes later, same recommendation comes back. I experience a lot of patronizing and a lot of just not even acknowledging that I'm in the space sometimes. I'm a Black woman. I had an affair with the queer community. And so I often find that the workspace is pretty isolating. A mentor shared some tips with me because I was really struggling, that you have to understand men, okay? And as a queer woman, that's like foreign to me, but you have to understand men in the workplace. And so what I've been able to do is understand their way of thinking, understand their way of leading, understand their way of communicating. And if you can unpack that and pay attention to that, then you're able to really navigate the space, because they really don't communicate a whole lot, not to be biased here, but it's very short and sweet, and you'll be able to pick up on the nuances that are actually going on in the room. And then you're able to practice your responses when they do push you in a particular corner, or you practice on speaking up when you are silenced in a particular way. And so, you know, back to what Sue said earlier about having a nice community, when you have that community, you can kind of run through those scenarios of, hey, this person said this to me, and how should I have responded? My number one advice would be not to shut down. Find a way where you can sit up a little bit taller, clear your throat, I jot some things down from time or two, and then say what you have to say, because there are too many women in this world that have fought for us to be at the table. But I've experienced all of it. But the best thing is figuring out how to respond to it, because it's not going to go away. It's two different types of communication styles, two different types of leading in that space. But if you can understand the male dynamic in the room, you'll be just fine.
I love that. Adding to that a little bit, something that I have practiced. I'm not quiet. I think that those of you who know me understand that. Where I use my voice in a very empathetic way, and I say that framing it this way. I think that oftentimes folks don't understand the impact of their behaviors, words. So I spend a whole lot of time saying, here's the situation, here's the behavior that I noticed, and here was the impact on that, either on me, on others, who identify like me within our community, et cetera. And spending a whole lot of time just sitting in that space and talking about it. So it's extra work, right? At the end of the day, I expend a whole lot of extra energy, extra work, but helping folks and putting that empathetic lens on to be able to say that and really think the best of somebody that I don't think they understand, right? what that impact, what that that behavior had, or what that comment, or when you talked over me, or when you repeated what I just said a minute ago, what that impact really has in spending that time in that space, helping them to be able to understand. I know it's helped my particular work environment, in particular. So I think it's really helpful advice to be able to put that cap on and seek advice from others who have experienced that.
And it may take practice.
Yes.
Because I just remember negotiating for my first job and salary, and it was scary and it was hard, but I practiced and I utilized mentors because one of the things that our women athletes might find themselves in is a situation in where they're expected to take care of everybody else's needs, right? In terms of the, being slotted into sort of a stereotypic role, and being able to catch that dynamic and then having somebody help you practice break that dynamic, and so sometimes you can educate in terms of what Sue just said, and sometimes you can also just confront it, like, are you asking me to do that because I'm a woman? Sometimes it's been helpful just to sort of name the dynamic, for people to kind of step back as well.
Yeah.
My next question is, as for you guys participating in sports growing up, or even maybe collegiately, how have those experiences, shaped your leadership?
I'm a coach, and I'm a former student athlete, and it's my foundation. Everything about my freshman year in high school, college, and my first year here in North Central is the same. Like, there isn't anything different. There's new team players you have to play with. There's some folks that you like. There's some folks that you don't like. There's some folks that you thought they could do one thing and they can't, and so you have to pivot. And so I would say everything about understanding the culture that you're working within, everything about identifying what is your role and executing your role to the best of your ability, and not feeling and not being insecure that your role may not be the role that you wanted. Because if you have the bigger agenda at the forefront, for me, it's serving students. And so understanding that role and then figuring out how can you make it better. Right now, there's a lot of chatter in the North Central kind of environment with the COVID, how things used to be, what have you. But how can you make it better, right? You can sit on those things, but at some point, I remember my teammates constantly, she's not putting the ball where I want it to be. Yeah, but how can you make it better? Could you get your foot there a little bit quicker? So everything about my playing career has prepared me for today. I often text my coach and say, thank you for the foundation that she's created for me. It's allowed me to manage my ego. I'll be honest with you, I'm a D1 kid, and there's a particular ego that you have to have going into that space. But it's taught me how to leverage my ego. It's taught me how to keep my ego in check, and it's taught me how to appreciate it at times. And so every single component, from how to study, how to prepare for the day, it is. And if you take it serious while you're in the moment, later you'll be texting your coach as well saying, wow, I was so ready for this position. I was so ready to deal with that difficult team member.
I think for me, when I'm reflecting upon what athletics has really afforded me in my career, I really go back to two different things, right? The first one is approaching every single as an athlete, I approached every single practice, every single lifting session with an intensity and with intention, right? That to me is it. I didn't just show up. There was a goal that was embedded into every single workout. I didn't do the workout. I did it to a different level, every single time. There was an intention. And that's how I approach my work day to this day. When I walk into a meeting, I have an intention in that meeting. When I roll up, I have 4 or 5 different things that I'm trying to achieve that day. That is just how I approach my life. Same thing at home. And sometimes my kids are like, Mom, can you just sit down for a minute? I approach my life with intensity. And there is a lot of intention that it goes along with that intensity. And the second thing is, for me, strive to be excellent. Yes. I'm not afraid to sit in a space and be able to say that I want to be excellent. I want you to be excellent. I want you to be excellent. I want women's athletics in general to be excellent. I'm not afraid to be able to dream about what that could look like and what the possibilities of what excellence could be. Those for me are really like the two core pieces that I have taken with me. Yes, it's given me a lot of other things and confidence and a platform and a voice, emotional IQ. I think that being a woman and a woman athlete within a team culture, like having and developing emotional IQ in that space is another thing. But those two key pieces are things that I think every single day as an athlete impact me.
I think being goal-driven, I think definitely I didn't play sports in college, but I did in high school. But I think being comfortable with competition, like if I knew where I wanted to go, that I wasn't afraid of that competitiveness and drive that you needed to get there, even if it impacted other people. Other people may not want you to do that or whatever it is, but being able to be competitive so you never lose your voice. So yeah,
Absolutely. I just think there's so many transferable skills from sport beyond the physical part of playing a game, but just all of the, like you said, emotional IQ to be able to join new teams in a workspace. It's really incredible to see that you still have that team atmosphere, but just in a different situation. I saw a study by EY and ESPNW from 2020 that said that women athletes make up 2% of college students, but they make up 52% of C-suite positions, which I just think is so incredible. Just the career potential that women athletes have and what they develop in their sport. What sort of advice can maybe you guys give, to allow them to capitalize on that and hone in on that?
Write it up on your resume. I used to, as a grad student, I used to help students with their resumes when they were graduating. But it's moving into North Central as the Title IX coordinator, what I wasn't aware of before because I hadn't participated in college level sports is just how much leadership opportunities athletes have. I mean, there are, team captains, and they're basically leading discussions about things that they've read or things that the coach wants them to cover. I mean, they are working with their teammates. They're giving each other feedback. So I think that those kinds of projects and activities and things that they've just done naturally and they probably don't think twice about, they can write that up in terms of the kinds of things they did as an athlete on this particular team. So I think that that's part of it. It's like being able to tease out those skills and experiences that really are marketable.
I would just add, learn how to recover. We are taught how to recover on the playing surface. You miss a block, there's a task that you can be doing. So how can you recover in the workplace? You miss a deadline, you say something you're not supposed to say. How can you recover in that space? And to be honest with you, it's no different than what you would do in practice or in a competition. You have to keep going. You have to have that intentionality. I'm a person that likes to have a little bit of a backup plan of what that backup play could be, but know how to recover. It'll allow you to move through the discomfort that you may feel as a woman, especially if there aren't any other women in the department. It'll allow you to move through those steps just a little bit quicker and stay on your P's and Q's.
If there was one last, piece of advice that you'd like to give our women student athletes, what would you like to leave them with?
For me, it's simple, short, sweet, and simple. Love yourself, right? At the end of the day, really know yourself and love yourself, and give yourself the space to be excellent and dream big.
I'm going to say speak up, speak. Don't allow for the uncomfortable spaces and the isolation or the unfamiliarity. Minimize your voice, speak up. You'd be surprised of how much people will appreciate what you have to say, but also thank you for what you said.
Yeah, I think own your power and strength. That's what I would lead with.
Awesome. Jessica, Rebecca, Sue, thank you all for coming. We appreciate you all for setting an example for what it means to be a fierce woman leader in sports and life. Thank you.